Today we're bringing you one of the coolest videos we've ever put together on this channel. A journey packed with glory, rivalry, and of course, plenty of controversy. The kind of story that still stirs up bodybuilding fans even now. Get ready to revisit moments that split opinions and left questions hanging in the air. Did the greatest champion of all time really earn every single one of his wins? That's the debate we want to have with you. So grab your pre-workout and come along, because this trip through the past is going to surprise you. And at the end, I really want to hear your take in the comments, because your voice is part of this story too. When we talk about bodybuilding, one name always comes up: Arnold Schwarzenegger. He wasn't just a champion. He became the face of an entire era. The guy who took the sport beyond gyms and magazines and pushed it into movies, TV, and pop culture. His run at Mr. Olympia, the biggest stage in bodybuilding, is legendary, filled with wins that literally shaped the history of the sport. But alongside all that glory came a whole lot of controversy. During his Olympia career, Arnold racked up back-to-back wins and built the image of a true king of bodybuilding. But every title seemed to come with debates, doubts, and even accusations of favoritism. His battles weren't only against the other giants of the sport, but also against the skepticism of fans and critics. That raises a question that still divides opinions today. Did Arnold really deserve every single one of his titles? From 1969 through 1980, the Austrian created moments that are still etched in fans' memories. From his debut against Sergio Oliva, to those disputed victories, to the years people claimed he won without real competition, all the way to his shocking comeback in 1980, considered by many the most controversial moment of his career. Every Olympia tells a different story, and each one leaves us with a new question. In this video, we're going to revisit every year Arnold stepped on the Olympia stage, not just to celebrate the wins, but to dive into the controversies that defined his path. We'll dig into the backstage stories, the rivalries, the questionable calls from the judges, and the crowd's reactions. Because at the end of the day, Arnold's legacy wasn't built only on muscle and trophies. It was also built on debates that still echo across generations. Now, don't get me wrong. Our goal here isn't to take anything away from the champ. Quite the opposite. Arnold was, without a doubt, one of the greatest athletes bodybuilding has ever seen. But when we look closely at each of those competitions, we have to ask, how much did charisma, politics, and influence weigh compared to symmetry and definition under the stage lights? That's what makes this story so fascinating. It's not just about who had the bigger muscles. It's about understanding how judging decisions, the cultural context, and even Arnold's media power played a role in shaping his titles. And that invites us to see bodybuilding not just as a sport, but as a spectacle full of nuances, where victory often goes way beyond the scale or the measuring tape. So here's my invite. Watch this video all the way through and join the conversation. Drop your honest opinion in the comments. Do you think Arnold earned every single one of his Olympia titles, or were some of them more built than truly won? And let's kick things off with the epic year of 1969, when a young Austrian named Arnold Schwarzenegger stepped onto the Mr. Olympia stage for the very first time. Up to that point, the contest had one clear king, Sergio Oliva, famously nicknamed the Myth. With 3 consecutive titles under his belt, Sergio looked unbeatable, with a physique so jaw-dropping it almost seemed superhuman. And it was against this giant that Arnold made his debut, in what would become one of the most legendary rivalries in bodybuilding history. Arnold walked in looking massive, his muscles full and his stage presence impossible to ignore. But compared to Sergio, his body still lacked maturity. Oliva's physique wasn't just big, it looked flawless, with freakishly huge arms, a razor-thin waist, and proportions that wowed the judges and stunned the crowd. On top of that, Sergio was already a seasoned veteran, while Arnold was still carving out his place. The result was no shocker. Sergio Oliva took the win and claimed his 3rd Olympia crown, holding on to his spot as the undisputed king of bodybuilding. But Arnold's loss wasn't seen as a failure at all. In fact, his debut made it obvious there was something special about him. His charisma, his stage presence, and the raw potential in his physique all signaled he was destined to become the sport's future. Still, the buzz started immediately. Had Arnold been hyped up too soon as Sergio's perfect rival? That's where the first controversy was born. Some critics believe the IFBB already saw Arnold as the ideal successor and was pushing his rise way too fast. Even if he didn't yet have the muscle density to beat Oliva, just being in that final showdown felt like a preview of a new era coming. The real question was, did Arnold really deserve to be on that stage so early, going head-to-head with the greatest of all time? It's also important to remember the bigger picture. Joe Weider, the man behind the federation, was heavily backing Arnold, betting on him as the next superstar who could turn bodybuilding into a global phenomenon. To some, the rivalry felt less like a pure competition and more like a story carefully scripted in advance. Sergio may have been the undisputed champion, but the narrative was already starting to tilt toward the Austrian. The following year, the 1970 Mr. Olympia took place in New York and went down in history as the year Arnold Schwarzenegger finally claimed his first crown. Just 1 year after debuting against Sergio Oliva, the Austrian came back sharper, more confident, and determined to prove he'd learned from that loss. His physique had improved with more definition, more refinement, and his stage presence was quickly becoming an unbeatable weapon. It was the beginning of the reign of the man the world would come to know as the Austrian Oak. Of course, his main rival was once again Sergio Oliva. The Cuban was still seen as the most impressive man in bodybuilding, carrying that invincible aura with him. With those gigantic arms, insane proportions, and jaw-dropping muscle density, Sergio still looked a step above everyone else. A lot of people thought it was only a matter of time before he grabbed his 4th consecutive title. But what happened that night shocked the crowd. The judges awarded the win to Arnold Schwarzenegger. For the first time ever, Sergio Oliva was defeated at the Olympia. The decision, though, wasn't without controversy. Many fans and experts believed that, even though Arnold had clearly improved, Sergio still had the more complete and more striking physique. To them, the Austrian's victory felt like a strategic move by the IFBB, which was already looking for a fresh face to take the sport to the next level. That perception fueled the debate. Did Arnold really deserve that title? Or was he favored by a federation that already saw him as bodybuilding's perfect global ambassador? Joe Weider, the founder of the Olympia and Arnold's biggest supporter, was accused of pulling strings to push his protege into the spotlight, ensuring the contest would grow its media reach. After all, Arnold already had that rare ability to connect with the crowd, something that could pull attention way beyond the walls of the gym. Even among fellow competitors, the decision didn't sit well. Plenty of guys on stage believed Sergio still had the upper hand physically. But Arnold, with his trademark confidence, wasn't fazed by the criticism. For him, that win was proof that his hard work had paid off. More than that, it was the first step toward the reign he had been carefully planning all along. The 1970 title marked a turning point. Sergio was no longer untouchable, and Arnold took the throne, though under a cloud of protests and doubts. It was the start of a new Olympia storyline, one that mixed athletic merit with whispers of backstage politics. The fair win or favoritism debate became an inseparable part of Arnold's journey in the contest. At the end of the day, the 1970 Olympia opened the door to a new era. Arnold's victory shifted the balance of power and gave the competition a new leading man. But along with that crown came a question that still echoes today. That night, was Arnold's physique truly superior to Sergio's, or did backstage influence tip the scales? That's what makes 1970 one of the most controversial chapters in Olympia history. The 1971 Mr. Olympia went down as one of the most controversial editions in bodybuilding history. The contest took place in Paris, France, and it was supposed to be an epic showdown between some of the biggest names of the era. Giants like Sergio Oliva, Franco Columbu, and Roy Callender were all set to compete, along with other athletes who promised to make it a historic battle. But what was meant to be a clash of titans ended up turning into a one-man show: Arnold Schwarzenegger. The controversy actually started before the event. The IFBB decided to ban several top athletes because they had competed in rival federations, which went against the organization's rules. Sergio Oliva, considered Arnold's greatest rival, was among those punished. Franco Columbu, Arnold's close friend and training partner, was also sidelined. That left the stage practically empty, with only Arnold left to compete. When competition day came, the scene felt almost surreal. The crowd, expecting an intense battle, watched as Arnold posed all by himself. With no real challengers, the Austrian was automatically declared the champion, picking up his second consecutive title. But for many, it didn't feel like a true victory, more like a gift. After all, how can you talk about fairness in sport when there's no one to measure against? The IFBB's decision drew heavy criticism. Many fans accused the federation of bending the rules to protect Arnold and smooth his path to becoming the sport's new poster boy. Others argued the punishment was necessary to maintain the organization's authority, but even then, it was hard to ignore that Arnold came out as the biggest beneficiary. Yes, he won, but it was a win surrounded by doubt. Even Arnold himself seemed aware of the situation. Sure, he held the trophy officially, but he knew that title didn't carry the same weight as the others. He went on stage, showcased his physique, and accepted the applause, but without the thrill of actually beating rivals in battle. It was a crown handed over without a fight, and that dulled its shine. For fans and critics alike, the inevitable question arose. Could that victory really be considered legitimate? Technically, Arnold looked incredible, maybe even the best of the night had there been competition. But in the public imagination, the 1971 Olympia will always be remembered as the one he won alone. A stain that stuck to his career and fueled ongoing debates about favoritism. The 1971 Olympia left behind an important lesson. Bodybuilding doesn't thrive without rivalry. Arnold was crowned champion, but the contest lost credibility. Instead of solidifying his reign, that victory gave critics more fuel to argue that he was the Federation's chosen golden boy. Once again, the doubt lingered. In that year, did Arnold truly win? Or was he simply spared from the defeat he might have faced? The 1972 Mr. Olympia took place in Essen, Germany, and it became one of the hottest stages of the rivalry between Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sergio Oliva. After the controversial 1971 title, where Arnold won basically unopposed, the anticipation was sky-high to finally see the two giants face off again. This time, there would be no excuses. The crowd wanted the real battle that never happened the year before. Sergio Oliva came back determined to reclaim his crown. With that dense muscle, those freakishly massive arms, and a body structure that seemed to defy logic, the Cuban stepped on stage in one of the best shapes of his career. The audience was blown away by his fullness and sheer visual impact. It felt like the myth was ready to prove he was still the true king of Olympia. Arnold, on the other hand, was also at an elite level. His progress since 1969 was undeniable. He was bigger, sharper, and carried an unmatched stage presence. His ability to pose, smile, and command attention felt almost theatrical, setting him apart from every other competitor. Arnold had that rare combination of physique and charisma that could win over both judges and fans at the same time. But that's exactly where the controversy sparked. When the results were announced, Arnold was declared the winner, with Sergio in second place. The crowd reacted in a split. Plenty of people believed that, purely from a physical standpoint, Sergio had the edge that night. His muscle density and shock factor seemed superior. For those fans, the outcome felt flat-out unfair. Critics quickly pointed out that Arnold's victory wasn't just about his shape, but also about the backing he had from the Federation and Joe Weider himself. The suspicion was that the IFBB wanted to cement Arnold as the new face of global bodybuilding, pushing Sergio into the background. That theory gained weight because, aesthetically, a lot of observers thought Oliva had dominated the matchup. Still, it's important to acknowledge that Arnold brought more than just muscle. His confidence, his posing mastery, and his psychological edge of always appearing in control played a huge role in the judges' eyes. While Sergio impressed with his physique, Arnold gave off the sense that he owned the entire stage. The 1972 Olympia went down as one of the most controversial battles in history. Arnold walked away with his third title, but under a heavy cloud of debate. Was it a fair win, or a political move to crown the athlete who best represented the future of the sport? The 1973 Mr. Olympia took place in New York and went down in history as the edition where Arnold Schwarzenegger delivered one of his most jaw-dropping versions ever on stage. Weighing in at around 240 pounds, about 110 kilos, of perfectly distributed muscle, he showcased a level of definition that was rare for that era. Deep cuts, balanced proportions, and the trademark confidence that had already become his signature. For many experts, This was the sharpest Arnold of his entire competitive career. But at the same time, this Olympia brought a different kind of controversy. If 1972 had been all about the heated rivalry with Sergio Oliva, in 1973 the lack of serious opponents left Arnold with a path that felt almost too easy. His main challengers just weren't at their best, and that made part of the crowd question the real value of his victory. After all, what does dominance mean if there are no worthy adversaries? Among the competitors were respected names like Serge Nubret and Franco Columbu, but neither came close to matching the impact Arnold brought to the stage. The gap in size, proportion, and stage presence was so massive that the contest felt lopsided from the start. This only fueled the idea that, while Arnold may have been at his peak, his win was helped along by the absence of true threats. That set up an interesting debate. Was Arnold's achievement that night the result of flawless work and dedication? Or was it simply because there was no one who could go toe-to-toe with him? Many fans began to wonder if the Olympia was becoming too predictable, almost like a parade staged just to confirm the Austrians' favoritism. Still, you can't deny the visual impact Arnold delivered in 1973. His blend of mass and definition was so refined it reset the standard for bodybuilding. Even without rivals to push him, his physique inspired thousands of young lifters worldwide to chase that same level of commitment. Critics, however, argued this was yet another example of the Arnold era, where everything seemed to revolve around him. Some believe the lack of competition was no accident, but rather the result of the dominance he and the IFBB held over the sport, which either kept rivals away or cut down their chances. That narrative only strengthened the idea that Arnold didn't just win. He competed on a stage already set up for his success. The 1973 Olympia is remembered as the year we saw the most defined Arnold in history, but also as a contest missing the thrill of a true showdown. It was the victory of a perfect physique, but without the fire of rivalry. The 1974 Mr. Olympia was a true turning point in bodybuilding history. Held at Madison Square Garden in New York, the event was unlike anything the sport had seen before, compared by many to the grandeur of mainstream sports finals. For the first time, the Olympia broke into the mass media, even landing coverage in Sports Illustrated, and it carried the aura of a cultural happening. And at the very center of it all was Arnold Schwarzenegger, already a four-time champion, ready to defend his throne. The big innovation that year was the introduction of weight classes, up to 200 pounds, about 90 kilograms, and over 200 pounds, 90 plus kg. The idea was to create more balance, giving smaller athletes a real shot at glory. This setup paved the way for legendary duels, like Franco Columbu versus Frank Zane in the lighter class, and Arnold versus Lou Ferrigno in the heavyweight. It was a night where different styles of bodybuilding clashed, fueling even more anticipation among fans. The most hyped matchup, no doubt, was the showdown between Arnold and Lou Ferrigno. At just 22 years old, Lou was a towering newcomer, 6 feet 5 inches, 1.96 meters, tall, weighing around 265 pounds, 120 kilograms, a true giant who stood out for his sheer size. The media billed him as Arnold's natural successor, and their face-off was dubbed the Battle of the Titans. The crowd wanted to see if the future could finally topple the present. But when the contest played out, the reality told a different story. Despite Lou's imposing frame, his prep wasn't perfect. He had competed just days earlier at another show and lost some of the density that made him so imposing. Arnold, meanwhile, stepped on stage in his absolute best shape yet. Massive, sharply defined, and radiating unmatched confidence. On top of that, he used his trademark psychological warfare, mimicking Lou's poses and then hitting them better, sending the crowd into thunderous applause. That gap made people wonder how competitive the showdown really was. Was it truly a balanced fight, or just a storyline crafted to sell the spectacle? Lou was young, inexperienced, and hadn't yet mastered the art of posing, while Arnold was at the height of both his physical and mental game. The outcome, Arnold claiming his 5th straight Olympia title, felt almost inevitable. The controversy didn't stop with the heavyweights. In the under 200 division, Franco Columbu's win over Frank Zane stirred plenty of debate. Zane brought a classic, aesthetic physique, with clean lines and symmetry that many felt outshined Franco's dense, compact build. The split decision foreshadowed the growing appreciation for aesthetics that would shape bodybuilding in the years to come. The 1974 Olympia will forever be remembered as the Battle of the Titans, but also as proof of how bodybuilding was becoming a spectacle. Arnold left the stage solidified as a legend, but with a lingering question: did he really face a rival worthy of the hype, or just an opponent the media sold as his great challenge? The 1975 Mr. Olympia, held in Pretoria, South Africa, was unforgettable. It marked Arnold Schwarzenegger's farewell to the stage. The contest made history not only for its outcome, but because it was immortalized in the documentary Pumping Iron, which captured the behind-the-scenes prep, the rivalries, and the theatrical side of bodybuilding. More than just a competition, that year turned Olympia into cinema, giving the sport a cultural reach it had never seen before. Arnold came into the show as a five-time champion, confident, and already set on making it his last appearance. Behind the scenes, he openly admitted he had nothing left to prove, and his attitude on stage reflected exactly that: calm, in control, and exuding a kind of ease that intimidated his rivals. To the audience, it almost felt like everyone already knew who would be crowned, as if the outcome had been written before the show even began. Once again, his biggest rival was Lou Ferrigno, trying to bounce back from his loss in 1974. The documentary leaned heavily into this matchup, framing it as Arnold's ultimate test. But just like before, Lou wasn't quite at the same level of maturity or conditioning as the Austrian. The giant had the size, but lacked the sharp definition and the stage charisma needed to truly threaten Arnold's well-established reign. Controversy also flared up again in the under 200-pound class. Just like the year before, Franco Columbu and Frank Zane went head-to-head in a tight battle. Zane, with his aesthetic and classic lines, won over a portion of the crowd, but once again the judges handed the victory to Franco, whose muscle density was undeniable. Many felt Zane had been robbed, fueling the ongoing belief that the IFBB at the time prioritized mass and volume over aesthetics. The grand finale brought together the winners of both classes, Arnold in the heavyweight and Franco in the lightweight. No surprise here, Arnold was declared the overall champion, picking up his sixth consecutive Olympia title and closing out his competitive career on top. But the result also left behind a sense of predictability, since the Austrian seemed untouchable compared to the rest. And then came the cameras. The presence of Pumping Iron added yet another layer of controversy. Many critics argue the documentary helped shape the narrative of the contest, putting Arnold at the center as the hero while turning his rivals into supporting characters. The film undeniably elevated his image far beyond the sport itself, but it also sparked doubt. How much of that 1975 victory was truly won on stage, and how much was secured behind the scenes through media storytelling? The 1975 Olympia will forever be remembered as the end of an era. Arnold walked away undefeated since 1970, cementing his name as the greatest champion up to that point. But along with the glory came the lingering question: was his farewell a fair win, or simply the final act of a carefully scripted story designed to crown the legend? 5 years after officially saying goodbye to the Mr. Olympia stage, Arnold Schwarzenegger shocked the world when he announced his comeback in 1980. The contest was held in Sydney, Australia, and right from the start the atmosphere felt strange. Nobody expected him to compete. Officially, Arnold was retired, focused on his movie career and political ambitions. When he suddenly showed up on stage, it caught everyone off guard, including his competitors, who immediately felt the entire contest shift in tone. The Arnold who appeared in Sydney wasn't the same Colossus from 1974 or 1975. While he was still in great shape, his physique didn't carry the same density, definition, or muscle maturity as before. On paper, athletes like Frank Zane, Mike Mincer, and Chris Dickerson were more prepared. But Arnold seemed to have something none of them could match: the absolute confidence of a man who had already reigned supreme for years. During the show, the tension was palpable. Several competitors later said Arnold once again used his trademark psychological warfare, commanding the stage, locking eyes with the crowd, and stealing the spotlight with every pose. Behind the scenes, frustration was growing. It felt like the outcome was already written before the final comparison. Even the audience sensed it, and the 1980 Olympia became remembered less for the physiques on stage and more for the controversy surrounding it. When the judges announced Arnold as the champion, the reaction was instant shock. The crowd split in two, some erupted in cheers, while others booed loudly in protest. Among the athletes, outrage was even stronger. Frank Zane, the defending champ, had competed despite an injury and still brought an aesthetic, refined physique. Mike Mincer, with his dense muscle mass, looked ready to claim victory. But none of it outweighed Arnold's symbolic presence on stage. Afterward, the backlash exploded. Many competitors openly accused the IFBB of rigging the result in Arnold's favor. Mike Mincer, in particular, was so furious he vowed never to compete in Mr. Olympia again. For him and others, 1980 was the ultimate proof that the contest wasn't about rewarding the best physique anymore, but about feeding the Austrian's legend. Arnold, on the other hand, never showed regret. In interviews, he insisted he entered the show just for fun and didn't expect to win, but claimed the judges simply recognized his superiority. For his fans, it was the crowning moment of a champion who knew how to use not only his body, but also his mind and charisma as weapons. For critics, it stood as the biggest injustice in Olympia history. The 1980 comeback remains the most controversial chapter of Arnold's bodybuilding career. It gave him his 7th title, cementing him as the greatest of his era, but also left behind a stain that still divides opinions. Was it a legitimate triumph, or a stage performance designed to immortalize the myth? That question has haunted the legacy of the Austrian oak for more than 4 decades, and the debate isn't going away anytime soon. Looking back at each of Arnold Schwarzenegger's Olympias, it's clear his journey wasn't just about muscle, trophies, and charisma. It was also constantly shadowed by controversy. Almost every year sparked debates about fairness, favoritism, and even possible backstage manipulation. Arnold was, without a doubt, a physical and psychological phenomenon, but he was also an athlete at the very center of the discussions that shaped bodybuilding itself. From 1969, when he lost to Sergio Oliva, all the way to his controversial comeback in Australia in 1980, every chapter raised new questions. Some years, people argued his rivals were better prepared. Other times, the criticism was about the lack of real competition or about the political influence Arnold seemed to carry behind the scenes. And yet, it's impossible to deny he had something no one else did: the ability to dominate the stage and get inside his competitors' heads like nobody else. That mix of glory and controversy built a narrative that made Arnold larger than the sport itself. He wasn't just a champion. He became a cultural icon who pushed bodybuilding beyond the gym walls and into movies, TV, and the imagination of millions. His titles, whether you see them as fully deserved or not, helped shape the legend that went on to inspire entire generations. And that's exactly where the fascination lies. If all of his wins had been unanimous and undisputed, maybe Arnold wouldn't be remembered as much as he is today. What makes him so unique is that duality: the unquestionable greatness of the athlete versus the eternal doubts about his victories. It was in that tension that the almost mythical figure of the Austrian oak was born. But in the end, the question still lingers: did Arnold really deserve every single one of his Olympia titles? For some, the answer is yes. His charisma, his presence, and his physique were unmatched. For others, he was more a product of politics, media, and Joe Weider's influence. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle, and that's why the debate never dies. Now I want to hear from you. Which of Arnold's titles do you think was the most controversial? Do you believe he truly earned them all, or were some years tipped more by politics than pure sporting justice? Drop your thoughts in the comments and join the conversation. If this video brought you value, don't forget to hit that like button. It helps the channel grow and shows us it's worth continuing to bring you content like this. And if you're not subscribed yet, now's the time. Click subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapters in our deep dive into bodybuilding history. And one more thing. If you'd like to support the channel even further, consider becoming a member. That way, you help keep this project alive and get access to exclusive content and perks.